Adrian, truck inspections play a large role in commercial trucking. Traditionally, how are inspections handled?
With traditional trucks, they inspections are done either roadside or at an inspection station, a safe location where the inspector can walk around the vehicle. And they're very interactive. We rely really heavily on the driver to assist with roadside inspections. So, like driver honk your horn, driver rock your steering wheel back and forth, press your brakes, and that allows us to rely on the driver to activate the various parts of the and components on the system to verify like the brakes are working and the lights are working and all the hoses are working and air pressure is working. And so that's how a typical inspection is done on a trunk. It's very hands-on, it's very interactive and reliant on the driver.
Are there safety concerns doing on the side of the road? Because we've all read the horrific stories of an individual going to the breakdown lane and unfortunately killing somebody. How is it done safely?
Yeah, we've got a ton of operational policy and guidance for the inspectors. Typically, if a inspector is driving on the road and they see a vehicle that they want to inspect, they may pull it over to the side of the road to do a quick like interaction with the driver and maybe a quick walk around. But if they decide they actually want to inspect that vehicle, they're going to escort it to a safe location down the road, maybe a large parking lot that they know of. I know here in DC on the Beltway, there's like a giant IKEA parking lot near the interstate, so they can take them to a safe location. It would be very rare that an actual go under the truck type of inspection would be happening on the side of the road for exactly the reason you mentioned. It just kind of creates a hazard for the driver, for the inspector, and for the driving public as well.
Who are the inspectors? Are they state highway patrols? Are they safety officers? Who are those inspectors?
Yeah, so it's a mix. It depends on the jurisdiction, what agency is designated as responsible for commercial motor vehicle enforcement. But typically it's highway patrol, state police. Sometimes it's the Department of Transportation. We have both sworn and civil inspectors. And so it depends state to state exactly who's doing it. There's a couple of public utility commissions as well. But yeah, it's a mix of sworn and non-sworn folks who specialize in truck and bus inspection.
Have you seen any patterns in the data or patterns in conversations which would trigger an official or an inspector to pull a commercial vehicle over? Are there certain things that they look for?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So they have access to the motor carrier's safety performance data, which is just kind of the history of all of the inspections and investigations and things like that. They have access to that through their inspector systems. And so they rely very heavily on past inspection data, past performance, and then they also use their own agency priorities and their own visual observation of the vehicle and the driver as well. A whole combination of things factor into how inspectors on the side of the road or out on the road select vehicles for inspection. And then it works a little differently at the roadside inspection stations because obviously the vehicles, when the station is operational, are required to pull in. And there's a kind of a screening system in place typically where they're running the license plate, they're looking at the DOT number, pulling up all that same information, the motor carrier's safety performance and history. And then they're doing kind of a visual observation as the truck drives along. And then they decide, hey, pull around back or you're good to go, green light back onto the interstate.
Is there by the stations? Are you referring to those as way stations?
Yeah, those are way stations. Yeah, they typically do weight enforcement and inspection at the same location. So when you're driving down the interstate, you see the trucks pulling into the way stations on the side of the road. Those are typically staffed by mix-app officers who are doing the weight enforcement as well as screening trucks to pull in for inspection.
I'm a kid. I grew up in Connecticut, and we go on 95 quite a bit. And I'll never forget there was a way station. And you're a kid. You look out the window. Before we had iPads, we looked out the window. You notice all sorts of stuff. We used to count colors of cars. We used to play punch buggy, all sorts of fun games. But I'll never forget the way station. For some reason, it's stuck in my head. Sometimes you drive by, it was open. You would have the sign above. It would say it was open. Other times it was closed. What would cause a way station on such a busy corridor to be open or to be closed?
Staffing, for the most part, it would depend on the size of the program and availability of inspectors and weight enforcement officers to man the inspection station. Obviously, you don't want to be pulling vehicles in if you don't have the people there to do something about it. And in jurisdictions that have kind of smaller programs, they may not be at that inspection station that day. They may be on a different one. Rotating through the stations, but it comes down to manpower.
Is there a pattern for, say, every 100 miles, 200 miles, 300 miles that there is one of these stations, or are they strategically put based on truck traffic?
I don't don't think either. No, there's no pattern. It's not every set however miles. And I would argue probably that it varies dramatically from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. There are some states that don't have inspection stations the same way you think of if you're going around 95 or in Connecticut. I think it is a combination of where it makes sense because of the traffic, like you said, and then where there was, because they're all kind of built now, where there is the space to put an inspection station because you need a lot of space to put the station itself, the laneage for the vehicles to come in and go back onto the roadway, and then the pull around to the back to do kind of the inspections themselves and parking. So a lot of different factors go in. I know that when they do build inspection stations now, they do look at traffic. There's new stations being put into place down in like Texas, for example, and they looked at what truck traffic volume was looking like for them along the border and where there were a lot of trucks coming in, and are building kind of more robust inspection stations there.
What's going to happen when autonomous trucks enter the picture? Next month, if all goes according to plan, Aurora has publicly stated in SEC filings that they are going to go Dallas to Houston, drive route at first one vehicle, and then the filing said multiple vehicles. Not going to project a number, but the SEC filing said multiple vehicles. What happens to the way stations? Will these autonomous vehicles have to go in there? Do they have to be programmed to go in these inspection stations? Or what happens?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and something that we had been working on for the last several years to try and figure out how do we incorporate this next generation of technology into the existing North American standard inspection program, right? And we did 18 months of study and research and discussions with law enforcement, inspectors, the ADS developers, the motor carriers, the federal partners, and kind of came to the conclusion that these trucks don't fit into our current model. It would not be practical to try and include every inspection station in the country as part of the operational design domain. The inspection stations and the property around there aren't really designed to accommodate these vehicles. What would you do? Because we rely so heavily on the driver for the inspection, like I mentioned earlier. So even if you mapped every inspection station into the operational design domain, we would still need a human being to help us conduct the inspection of the physical components of the truck itself, right? So we developed an alternative approach to ensuring that autonomous trucks are operating safely and that the components associated with the truck tractor itself and the trailer itself are being safely maintained. We've come up with an enhanced inspection program. It's an alternative to the standard inspection model that we use for trucks with drivers in them. And essentially, it is a zero defect point of origin inspection that the vehicle and trailer have to go through prior to dispatch. They are inspected to a very high standard to make sure that all of the vehicle components are in good operating order and are unlikely to deteriorate or break or come out of adjustment during the trip. And so it's a higher standard that they're held to, and they are inspected by a certified inspector. And then that certified inspector signs off at the end of the inspection that the vehicle meets the checklist, the inspection, it passed the inspection, there's no defects, that the ADS system is operational, and that the vehicle can communicate with roadside enforcement. And if it checks all three of those boxes, it can go on down the road. And then when the vehicle passes an inspection station or a mobile inspection unit or anything like that, it triggers a communication of a data package that triggers those three checkboxes, right? I was inspected at this time by this inspector. All of my systems are operational, and I'm where I'm supposed to be and operating how I'm supposed to be. And the inspector or the enforcement entity receives that data package, and the vehicle's allowed to bypass way stations and go on down the road rather than stopping en route. And the idea is that we hold these vehicles to a higher standard at dispatch. And then because of that higher standard, we have a level of security thinking that all the vehicle components are safe and in good working order until the vehicle gets redispatched or the next 24 hours. So they go through this process pretty regularly, and that's how we maintain a higher level of safety assurance for the components of the vehicle.
Is that done pre-launch for every time an autonomous truck is launched?
Yes, every dispatch or every 24 hours, whichever it's on, right? Because in theory, these things could go back and forth, several times a day, depending on the route itself. And so, yes, it's every dispatch or every 24 hours.
So what you just said in simple terms, you're making the road safer because the men and women in law enforcement are getting data to understand the vehicle's safe, and the individuals on the motoring public know that the vehicle's safe because of all the inspections that it goes through versus traditional inspection. You mentioned that they're certified inspectors, and some of those individuals come from law enforcement. Since these inspections will be happening on a daily basis, Are those certified inspectors, are they employees of the company? Or is there a third party that operates that? Is there an organization of perhaps retired law enforcement officials that do this? Who does that?
So we're in the early stages now, obviously. Right now, the folks who are certified in the enhanced inspection program are generally affiliated with the ADS developers themselves. So, each of the individual companies has a group of folks who go through CVSA's enhanced inspection certification program. They become certified to do these inspections, and then they are the ones conducting them. It's important to note that the folks who are getting certified to do this enhanced inspection are not law enforcement. They are part of the industry and the motor carrier community. They could be folks that work for a trucking company. You could have like a firm that spins up and has a pool of enhanced certified inspectors, and they go out to the motor carriers themselves. So it could be a lot of different models in terms of who these people are and who they work for. But the key distinction is that they are not law enforcement. They are part of the industry. And then so we train them, we certify them, we sign off on that they know how to do the inspection. They're the ones doing the inspection. And then the quality control check would come from the law enforcement side when things like safety audits or compliance reviews and investigations take place. So you'd go in and kind of look at the records like we do now with the regular vehicles and motor carriers, look at all the documentation, look at the safety performance. And so there is that check and balance from the law enforcement side of things on the compliance review and investigation side of things, just to verify that everything within the motor carrier or the ADS operator, whoever is doing the inspections, are doing them correct.
Job creation. It's another bullet point that autonomous trucks in the industry are going to create jobs, and you're going to have individuals that are going to spin up firms. Perhaps as you have temporary staffing firms, you can have an individual spin up a certified inspection firm. How does the training program work? How long is it? What goes into that program?
Yeah, so right now it's a week-long program. We developed the curriculum, and essentially it models the curriculum that we use for roadside inspectors, right? It walks them through all of the vehicle components, what they're checking for, how they're checking, why they're checking, and kind of in what order to do it, honestly. So it walks them through the whole process. They spend a whole week training, putting their hands on trucks and looking at them. And then at the end of the week, there is both a written test to make sure that there is understanding of the materials itself. And then there is a practical test where you go out and do an inspection on a truck to demonstrate that not only do you understand it, but you can actually execute it as well. And if you pass both of those things, there's, benchmarks and like minimum levels you have to hit, then you become certified. And then we have recertification requirements as well, because obviously vehicle components continue to evolve. And so you can't get certified once and do it for 25 years and never go in and get recertified. You do have to kind of maintain your certification to stay up on the evolution of the industry. And I think the key piece here is to mention that the inspection that I'm talking about, what the inspectors are looking for and looking at, they're looking at the physical components of the vehicle. They're looking at the engine. They're looking at the brake lines. They're looking at the air lines. They're looking at the lighting and everything like that. They are not going in and trying to evaluate the ADS system itself. That's a different piece of the process. They are going in to make sure that the vehicle itself will be able to operate safely and that the brakes will work correctly and all of that. So that's what they're going in and looking at.
It's a brilliant marriage between industry and safety, because both parties are fully aligned. With both parties being fully aligned, there's a very clear path forward to deploying safe autonomous trucks on the roads. Are there any regulatory hurdles that potentially stand in the way as it relates to these enhanced inspections?
The big question is, how are the regulations going to apply to an ADS equipped vehicle, right? And I don't want to call that a hurdle, because, I think that those are questions that absolutely can be answered. They just kind of need to be. So we are looking forward to continuing to work with the industry and with our federal partners to kind of figure out what portions of the regulations apply, which ones don't, and what needs to be adjusted to, again, accommodate this new generation of technology into the old model. The regs were obviously written assuming there would be a driver, just like our roadside program was written originally assuming there would be a driver. And so we're waiting to see what decisions the federal regulators make on how the FMCSRs apply to an ADS equipped truck, and then, make what adjustments we need to. I mean, the big obvious one is hours of service, right? Like, how does hours of service apply, if at all, to this vehicle? And so, I don't want to call them hurdles, but we are waiting to see what the regulators say about how these vehicles fit into the current federal regulation.
Then you have the warning triangle issue, which Aurora's very out there publicly fighting. That's an example of, I'll just say it point blank, it's an outdated regulation that doesn't apply to this. The hours of service, I'm not a lawyer, but shouldn't apply for a very simple reason. An autonomous truck doesn't get drowsy, it doesn't have emotions, it doesn't get tired. But yet you try and explain that to certain individuals, they make up all sorts of cockamamie stories, which you and I both know are not true, and we debunk them from time to time. How do we get law enforcement on board to buy into both autonomous trucks, into this really great enhanced inspection program that CVSA has developed?
I obviously I can't speak for everybody, but I think generally, at least our membership is on board. We all still have questions. We want to see how it's going to play out. We want to make sure that the model that we've set up that we believe will work and will establish a higher level of safety on the roadway for these vehicles. We expect it to. We'd like to see that play out and demonstrated. There's a pilot program beta testing going on down in Texas to see, does this work the way we think it does? And that's going very well. And so we are optimistic. I think the big thing is that we are trust but verify. You know what I mean? We believe very much that the ADS developers operating in this space believe in their safety mission, believe in their safety goals, and are doing everything necessary to ensure the safety of the vehicle. But it's law enforcement, and they can be a little bit cynical because they deal with some of the worst out there, right? And, right now, everybody in this space is doing everything they're supposed to, but once these vehicles become more widespread, you look at the data from the regular part of the industry right now, something like 20 to 25% of brakes are out of service on a regular basis out there based on inspection data. So, there's room for improvement there. And so we want to make sure that we are setting up a program that will help us address, future folks in this space who may not have the same level of commitment that the current people do, right? Like currently everybody's doing everything, but as it becomes more widespread, that might weaken a little bit. So, demonstrating this program, continuing to show that the enhanced inspection program works is something that I think will bring over any of the holdouts that are in the space for now. But law enforcement is super excited about the potential upside to this safety technology. And so we are working very hard to make sure that we're ready and prepared to do our part to ensure safety and compliance on the roadways when these things hit the road.
Did you ever get feedback when developing this from Gary McCarthy at Aurora, Brett Fabre at Kodiak, or Bart Teeter at Bot? Because I asked that. I've had dinner with all these gentlemen, and I've learned some of the most fascinating, interesting things, and that they make you think. And they would say something, and I would push back. Why think about that? We've seen it. What? And then Gary would go, and Brett would go, and Bart would go, and all these things that you would never think of, these gentlemen, when they were active law enforcement, now they're with the AV developers, would come up with things that you and I could never imagine. Did you gather that feedback or insight from them and put it into this inspection program just because of the experience that they have?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This entire program was developed from day one with input from the ADS developers, with input from law enforcement. The guys you all just named Bart chaired the committee that was in charge of this for a while. They are all been very actively involved. And that was critical because you kind of have to plan for all the what if scenarios, right? If you don't have all the experts in the room, what if this, but did you think of that? Then you don't come out with a quality product. And that's why it took so long, is because we were really troubleshooting everything we possibly could. So yeah, they were all involved. Like I said, ADS developers, the motor carrier community themselves were involved. Obviously the inspector community was involved. And then we, continue to include our federal partners in the discussion so they could see what we were thinking and what we were working on, and we could get their perspective as well.
How long did it take? You mentioned a long time now. The curiosity hat's going on. How long did it take?
So the initial study that we did, so the question was, how do we inspect these trucks? That was the original question. It took us 18 months to come up with the answer that our current program does not work with an ADS vehicle. So it took us 18 months because, again, we were diligent and we dug into it, and we wanted to make sure that we asked every question and looked at every possible scenario and alternative. And at the end of the day, what we concluded was the North American Roadside Inspection Program, the way it is currently built, is not designed to accommodate these vehicles. So what do we do next? And then we spent a couple of years coming up with the concept of the Enhanced Inspection Program, building out the curriculum, beta testing the curriculum. And like I said, we're currently kind of testing the last phase, which is the data exchange and how that all works. And so it's been, I want to say 5 years, but time really blurs and blends and flies for me. But it's been a several year process because, like I said, we are doing all of our due diligence. And the thing about the program is it will continue to evolve, just like our current roadside program. We will continue to look at the inspection procedures, the inspection criteria, the certification course, and how all of that works. And we are constantly getting feedback and working to improve it. And we will also have to continue to update and refine the enhanced inspection program as industry continues to evolve. What's coming online with brakes and lighting and all of those things as the physical components continue to evolve, we'll have to make sure that the enhanced inspection program reflects that as well.
And then if mirrors go away, that's been talked about quite a bit. If mirrors go away.
Mirrors, steering wheels, yeah, the whole list. You're just going to have to continue to reevaluate. And that's what we have a process for that. We have a working group on the enhanced inspection program that continues to operate and meet regularly. They report up to our enforcement and industry modernization committee, which is responsible for the program. They meet twice a year in person and a couple times virtually throughout the year. And then we have our board of directors. So we have a constant feedback loop and review process in place to make sure that we are continuing to make sure that this program works effectively.
Half a decade in is impressive. It says commitment. And then what you stated that you're going to continue to adapt as the technology adapts signals commitment. It signals strength at the end of the day. Initially, why was CVSA interested in getting involved with autonomous trucking? Did this evolve organically? Did the industry come to you? What initially started that?
It was a natural thing. You follow the pace of industry and what's next, and we, are continuously looking forward and saw the kind of expedited advancement of the ADS community. We saw that those things are coming. They're going to be here. How in the world do we inspect them? And that was the big question, is like, we were going to be responsible. Our inspectors are going to be responsible for, monitoring and ensuring the safety performance of those vehicles when they're on the roadways. Right. And so we had to, what in the world are we going to do with these things is kind of the question that popped up. And like I said, we went through that process. So, and I think one of the driving factors for us and why we were so committed to coming up with a solution rather than just being like, hey, y'all figure it out. Your trucks, it's your problem, not mine. One, that's not nice manners or very practical or reasonable, and we try to be reasonable. But two is that we really, like I said earlier, believe in the tremendous potential upside in terms of safety of these vehicles. We know driver behavior causes crashes. Like we know that most of the time the crash is not caused by the truck driver. Like, we know these things. And so when you have technology that can, respond so quickly to other external driver behaviors like this technology can do, you just see a tremendous opportunity to reduce the number and severity of crashes on our roadways that are killing 40,000 people a year. Anything we can do to reduce that number and make the roads safer and get more people home to their families and loved ones, you have an obligation to do what you can in that space.
Driving on the highway, scary. I'll make a confession here. I don't drive on the highway anymore. And I'm not that old. I just don't like it. I don't find it safe.
I'm right there with you.
Point blank. I don't do it. I refuse. No, you're going to go. No, I'm not going on the highway. Sorry. I'll go with a professional driver, but I don't want to drive because I have a young daughter and I call it Mario Kart land. Everybody on there thinks that they want to play Mario Kart land. 100 miles an hour here, 100 miles an hour there, and zigzag, wham, boom, bam. But if you're a truck, you and I know this, the stopping zone of a truck with 80,000 pound truck is a lot longer than somebody that thinks that they're Mario Kart. And that unfortunately causes crashes, and that leads to pileups, and that leads to economic damage. It leads to carnage. It leads to all sorts of bad things. But yet there's all this negative outcomes. It's all public data that happens with traditional human-driven trucks. The roads aren't safe, point blank. How do we get the public to buy into the safety message and truly understand the benefits, the safe benefits that autonomous trucks deliver? Because if you go in the Kodiak truck, you go in the Aurora truck, you go in the bot truck, these trucks are scanning 360 degrees, looking at every possible scenario. How do we get the public to really understand the true safety benefits of autonomous trucking?
I think it's exposure. I think it's demonstrating success. I think it is just, you kind of have to kind of cram it down people's throats. You've really got to make them look at it and think about it and demonstrate success. I mean, again, for the most part, the truck drivers are incredibly safe professional drivers out there, and they are dealing with people who are not taking the driving task seriously in the personal vehicle space, right? And so if we are able to put vehicles on the road that can respond to external factors more effectively, then that is saving lives. And we have to demonstrate to the public, continue to talk about it, continue to answer questions. You got to be open to answering the questions. Like, you can't say, man, I've been answering this question for 5 years now. I don't want to answer it anymore, because that person hasn't heard it. If they're asking the question, they've not heard the answer yet. So you've got to be willing to go and put yourself out into, forums and communities and answer the questions and sit there and be patient, because, it took us 18 months, like I said, to just get to the end of our study. It's understandable that people, when something new comes along, that they are skeptical. And if they don't live and work in this space, and they don't know the potential upside like you and I and others do. And so we just got to kind of convince them and bring it along. Like, I kind of try and talk about it when I can with family and friends, and, try to ease concerns if I hear folks talking about it out there in the world. And I think if more of us in this space took a little time to do that, we might, bring some people along more quickly.
The one thing I say to all the autonomous trucking companies is you got to teach your trucks when they scale to play the honk game, because then kids are going to think it's the coolest thing. You could put a Pixar animated character in there with augmented reality, and you go honk honk, and then, oh, this is cool. Look, mom, the dad, the truck, and then the kids start that process of building that trust. You and I both know if you start a job today as a truck driver, you'll retire as a truck driver. With that in mind, how do you see traditional human-driven trucks and autonomous trucks complementing each other?
I think that's exactly right. I think they complement one another. I mean, all of the models that I've seen and heard about are developers looking to set up corridors between major distribution centers along the interstate, where you go from point A to point B and back again, or maybe you go ABC and back again. But, people don't buy their goods at the distribution centers. We don't go to the lot where all the trailers sit to buy our goods. We go to stores to buy them, or to online sources, and they are delivered to us. So there is a lot of, at the end of the autonomous vehicles trip, there's still a lot of work that has to be done to get the products to the people. And so, my understanding is that, the autonomous vehicles would do some of the longer hauls, and then the truck drivers would come in, grab a trailer, and then do the delivery and the local stuff, which I think is perfect, because it keeps drivers home lot more. They don't have to be gone for 10, 11, 12, 15 days. They can be in their bed every night, or much more frequently. So I think that there's a tremendous upside in terms of quality of life for the drivers. And then they also have just kind of all the enhanced safety technologies that are coming along. Benefits, makes their job easier, hopefully. And so, yeah, I think we will continue to need drivers, because, again, I'm not going to the distribution center to get my groceries. I'm going to the grocery store. And for the foreseeable future, autonomous trucks are not going to the grocery store.
No, they're not. And if you look at the human driver, if you want to call it the first and last mile, look at the positive economic benefits that's going to have on the community. And I get pushback on this, but if you're home, you're going to your local grocery store. Perhaps you're going to your local diner or restaurant, or you're going out for a beer when you're not working. You're going to spend money in that economy. Another thing that now Senator Moody, had dinner with Senator Moody when she was the Attorney General of Florida, had a really interesting conversation with Senator Moody around human trafficking. And Senator Moody's thoughts were on autonomous trucking. It could help to lower human trafficking, which she explained in great detail to me, which is unfortunately a very big problem that some individuals sweep under the rug, but it's an enormous problem. What are your thoughts on human trafficking? How do you see autonomous trucking potentially blunting or slowing this down?
Well, I mean, I think that, we do know that some of that activity takes place at truck stops. It's a location that is targeted for it. We know that folks in that space use trucks to move their victims, unfortunately. And so I think if we, I would imagine that it would be more difficult for an autonomous truck to be used in that manner. And so I think that, there is a potential to reduce the opportunity and the motivation it'd be a little less easy to use the trucking community the way these criminals do to move their victims. So it's not an area I'm super fluent in, but I could definitely see an opportunity to be making it more difficult and less appealing to using the trucking community as a means to move victims of human trafficking.
I look at it this way. Hypothetically, we don't have data yet, but hypothetically, an autonomous truck is parked at a rest stop or fueling up. It has cameras. It could potentially share that data with law enforcement, and then once the bad actors, the criminals, learn that they're being spied on, perhaps that's another blunting tool. But then the other side of that, which is concerned that on trucking, outside of human trafficking, there is a parking shortage. How did we get there? How is that going to be solved?
How do we get there? Well, we continue to grow our population and our consumerism, which is good. People like to have things, and that drives the economy, and that's great. And we have such amazing opportunities in this country when it comes to access to products and things like that. So, we grew our population and our consumerism, but we did not keep pace with the truck parking opportunities. Like, there are millions of trucks out there, and we did not make sure we had a place for every driver to sleep safely when they need to. How do we get our way out of that? It's going to require investment in infrastructure. There is a lot of really great work being done in the tech side of things, trying to help drivers get better real-time access to where truck parking is available and what spots are ahead, and reserving spots and doing all of that stuff, which is phenomenal. That we are doing what we can to make use of the capacity that's there now. But the capacity that's there now is not enough for the number of trucks and drivers out there on the roads. And so the only solution to making sure we have enough truck parking is to make sure we have enough infrastructure to accommodate the truck parking. We need to use what we have better, and we need to make sure that we have more infrastructure for trucks to park safely.
Will that infrastructure investment, will that come from state DOTs? Will that come from the private sector, or will it come from the federal government?
I think it's going to have to use all of them. The federal government is going to have to make a commitment and an investment in this specifically. Like, truck parking is an eligible expense right now under the federal programs. States can use their federal dollars to install more truck parking space, but that's competing with bridges and interstate and repaving and all of the other infrastructure demands that these states and local governments have on their limited budgets, right? And so prioritizing and setting aside some dedicated funding for truck parking, I think, is really important, and that would require some work from the congressional level. And then the states have to prioritize those projects. Local communities have to recognize the need for truck parking and kind of get out of the NIMBY state of mind. Everybody wants their stuff, but nobody wants the trucks that bring it. And we have to do a better job of educating the public and making them understand, like, hey, you want that package delivered that you ordered yesterday. It's not teleporting to you magically. It's got to get on a truck and then come to you somehow, right? So we've got to have the national, federal commitment of funding, the states prioritizing these projects, and then you have to have the local communities willing to welcome these projects and these drivers. We talk about truck parking, but the truck doesn't need somewhere to park. The human being driving the truck needs somewhere to park, right? So, like, when you say, "Oh, I don't want those trucks parking in the parking lot at whatever RFK Stadium or whatever," like, you're saying you don't want those people to have a safe place to sleep and rest, and that's not very nice.
You just did a brilliant messaging. You humanized it at the end of the day. Those individuals have a right, because if you bought it, a truck brought it. They have a right of a place to sleep safely. They're brave men and women. I wouldn't do it. I couldn't do it. They go out there and drive for days at a time and go across country, and they basically put their lives on hold to bring you your goods. They deserve a safe place to sleep, because we don't have to get the statistics. But if you look outside of human trafficking and truck stops, they're not necessarily the safest places in the world, and there's lots of data to back that up. But the one thing that you and I know, the whole common denominator, is a lot of changes occurring in the trucking industry. How are you positioning CVSA for all of that change?
We are trying to stay involved in all of the conversations. We view our organization as a gathering point. We have the roadside inspector community. We have the motor carrier community. We have the industry that's built up in support of the motor carrier community, the developers and the suppliers. And we have the associations, and we have our federal partners. We have the ADS folks. We have state and local folks. And we really take very seriously our responsibility to gather all of these people and talk and understand and look ahead and look back and discuss what's happening in the industry, what's coming towards us in the future, and how do we need to continue to respond and adapt to make sure that we can meet our shared goal of reducing crashes, injuries, and fatalities involving large trucks and buses. And we need everybody at the table. We need every perspective. We believe very, very strongly that the more ideas and perspectives you can get into the discussion at the beginning, the better outcome you're going to have. And so we just continue, like I said, to engage in discussions, look ahead. We work very closely with our federal partners, with our industry partners, and we just ask that people continue to have these healthy dialogues so that we can answer questions and solve problems.
Having a conversation, no matter what industry you're in, no matter your political affiliation, is one of the most important things you can do, because I'll bet you're going to learn something that you might not have known. It could open up your eyes to see we both want, and this whole world wants, safer roads. And that's what autonomy with really great enhanced inspections are going to give us. Adrienne, in your opinion, what is the future of autonomous trucking?
The future for autonomous trucks is right. Like the short term is to demonstrate proof of product, right? Make your case. And then I think the sky is the limit in terms of the impacts on safety. Obviously, our top priority is the safety, right? So I'm going to say that every time. I think that the ability of autonomous vehicles to significantly impact the number of roadway fatalities is hard to overestimate. And so really looking forward to seeing that industry grow, build out, and really kind of change the way we look at trucking.
The common denominator is CVSA is making our roads safer. We thank you as a citizen of the United States for doing the great work that your partners, your team, and all of your affiliations are doing to make our roads safer. And hopefully one day the crashes will continue to diminish and eventually go away. That's what we want. We want safe roads, and CVSA is leading the way. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is enhanced inspections. Adrienne, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I had a great time.